For Pacifica Radio, I'm Scott Baba. The Russian Foreign Ministry called the United States' decision to deploy long-range missiles on German territory yet one more step in escalation. Moscow pledged a military response to what it sees as a threat to Russia's security. Daria Bondarchuk has more.
Commenting on Washington's decision to place its long-range missiles in Germany, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said such actions are aimed primarily at harming Russia's security. The nature of Moscow's reaction will be determined in a calm, professional manner, he added, noting Russian military staff had already taken Washington's message into account. Russian ambassador to the U.S. Anatoly Antonov called NATO's plans to deploy medium and short-range missiles in Europe a mistake that poses direct threat to international security and strategic stability. Earlier, the Kremlin warned the newly elected British Prime Minister of retaliation if the UK allowed Kyiv to strike Russian territory with Storm Shadow missiles. Daria Bondarchuk, Moscow.
Meanwhile, China has accused NATO of seeking security at the expense of others and told the alliance not to bring the same, quote, chaos to Asia. The statement today came from Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian, a day after NATO labeled China a, quote, decisive enabler of Russia's war against Ukraine. Lin accused NATO of interfering in China's internal politics and of smearing the country's image.
The NATO-Washington Summit Declaration plays up the tension in the Asia-Pacific region and is full of Cold War mentality and antagonistic rhetoric. The content concerning China is full of prejudice, smear, and provocation. We are strongly dissatisfied with this and firmly oppose it.
China has broken with the United States and its European allies over the war in Ukraine, refusing to condemn Russia's invasion. Its trade with Russia has grown since the invasion, at least partially offsetting the impact of Western sanctions. Kenyan President William Ruto has dismissed all of his cabinet ministers and promised to form a new government that will be lean and efficient following weeks of protests over high taxes and poor governance. In a televised address today, the president also dismissed the Attorney General and said ministries will be run by their permanent secretaries. Ruto said he made the move after listening to the people and that he would form a broad-based government after consultations. Kenya has seen 3 weeks of unrest during which protesters stormed into parliament on June 25th after a finance bill that increased taxes was passed. More than 30 people died in the protests, which have morphed into calls for the president to resign. Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez introduced articles of impeachment yesterday against members of the Supreme Court. Alex Gonzalez has more.
Progressive New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has moved to impeach Supreme Court Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, pointing to the refusal to recuse themselves even when found to have ties to right-wing megadonors and extremist movements. She calls the apparent bias a threat to the American rule of law.
And that court itself was appointed by the most corrupt president in American history, Donald Trump.
In a letter asking for investigation by a special prosecutor, 2 Democratic senators accused Thomas of taking a previously undisclosed yacht trip to Russia, paid for by a Republican billionaire. I'm Alex Gonzalez for Pacifica Network and Public News Service.
Inflation in the United States cooled in June for a third straight month, a sign that the worst price spike in 4 decades is steadily fading and may soon usher in interest rate cuts by the Federal Reserve. In a better-than-expected report from the government, consumer prices declined 0.1% from May to June, after having remained flat the previous month. Measured from 12 months earlier, prices were up 3% in June, down from 3.3% in May. The latest inflation readings could help convince the Fed's policymakers that inflation is returning to its 2% target. California's top fire officials say so far this year, the state has responded to more than 3,500 wildfires that have scorched nearly 325 square miles of vegetation. Blazes are also burning in Oregon, where the governor issued an emergency authorization allowing additional firefighting resources to be deployed. More than 142 million people around the U.S. were under heat alerts yesterday, especially across the West. Donna Warder reports.
National Weather Service meteorologist Morgan Stessman says some places in the West are hotter than they've ever been.
We hit 120 on Sunday. So that set our new all-time record.
And the hot conditions and low humidity that dry out the landscape increase the chances of a wildfire. In California, Joe Tyler, director of the state's Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, says the recent heat wave has exacerbated the problem, consuming thousands of acres. On Wednesday, California crews were battling at least 19 major wildfires in scorching temperatures and single-digit humidity. Several wildfires are also burning in Oregon, east of Portland, and southern New Mexico. Some 1,000 residents in Ruidoso fled their homes Wednesday as heavy rain produced flash flooding on top of wildfire burn scars for a second day in a row. I'm Donna Warder.
I'm Scott Baba for Pacifica Radio.